There are certain moments in life that unfold quietly, without warning, without any sign that something is about to change forever. They don't arrive with thunder, chaos, or alarms. They slip in like a whisper at the edge of an ordinary day, unnoticed at first, but powerful enough to alter the entire direction of a person's life. That morning felt exactly like that, calm on the surface, but carrying a weight I couldn't see. I woke up the same way I had woken up thousands of times before, sipping warm coffee while sunlight slid through the tall windows, falling softly across the table. Nothing about the moment suggested danger. Nothing hinted at betrayal. Nothing warned me that someone I trusted was about to make the coldest decision a human heart can make. People imagine that danger comes loudly, with noise, shouting, chaos, obvious signs. But the truth is, real danger is silent. It hides behind familiar faces, familiar voices, familiar routines. The people who wish you harm don't always come from the outside. Sometimes they sit beside you. Sometimes they smile at you. Sometimes they know your schedule, your habits, your weaknesses. And sometimes the person standing closest is the one holding the darkest intentions. I learned that truth not through rumors or stories, but through an experience that forced me to see the world with new eyes. It started as a normal day, meetings, documents, decisions waiting to be made, the usual rhythm. But something felt different in the air, like a subtle distortion in the atmosphere. Not fear, not suspicion, just a quiet imbalance, as if the world was holding its breath. I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't even acknowledge it. I brushed it off as morning fatigue, the kind that comes from long nights of thinking too deeply and sleeping too lightly. I didn't know that those small moments of intuition, the ones we ignore, are sometimes the very signs that could save our lives. When I sat down for breakfast, everything looked perfectly normal. The table was arranged the same way. The routine was unchanged. The people around me were familiar. And yet, somewhere in that quiet space, a choice had already been made. A choice that would have changed everything if it had succeeded. It's strange how a single decision by another person can shape the entire direction of your future without you knowing it. One silent attempt, one hidden action, one moment of cruelty behind a mask of calmness. The world likes to believe that success brings admiration, respect, applause, and it does. But it also brings envy, resentment, silent hatred that grows in the corners you never check. The higher you rise, the more invisible enemies you collect. Not because you harmed them, but because your existence reminds them of their failures. I never used to believe this. I trusted easily. I gave people the benefit of the doubt. After all, why would anyone wish harm on someone who only tried to build, improve, and create? But life has its own way of teaching lessons you never wanted to learn. That morning, I noticed small details, subtle, almost insignificant, an expression slightly too tense, a hesitation in someone's voice, a moment where eyes shifted away too quickly. Human intuition is powerful, even when we try to silence it. Our mind collects clues our conscious brain ignores. And even though I didn't know what was unfolding, a quiet part of me was aware that something was wrong. Not dramatic, not loud, just wrong. I lifted the glass slowly, unaware of the intention behind what had been placed in front of me. That's the terrifying part. How close danger can sit without revealing itself. The glass was ordinary. The drink was ordinary. The moment was ordinary. And yet, the story behind it wasn't. Sometimes the deadliest dangers don't show themselves in shadows or weapons. Sometimes they hide in the smallest things: a cup, a sip, a drop. Before the glass reached my lips, something inside me whispered. Not a voice, not a thought, just a feeling, a heaviness, a hesitation. A pause that lasted less than a second but contained more meaning than an entire lifetime. That pause saved me. Instinct is a strange guardian. It speaks quietly, softly, almost timidly. But when you listen, it becomes the strongest shield you'll ever have. A small shift in the room caught my attention. Someone's breath tightening, a flicker of panic in a gaze. It was enough. Enough to stop my hand. Enough to make me question what I had never questioned before. Enough to break the illusion of safety I had lived in for years. And in that single moment, everything changed. The calm morning cracked open, revealing the truth beneath it, a truth wrapped in silence, betrayal, and the coldest kind of intent. I set the glass down slowly, pretending nothing is wrong, pretending not to notice the sudden tension in the air, pretending not to see the faint tremor in someone's hand, pretending not to hear the quiet shift of footsteps behind me. But inside, a storm had begun, not of fear but of realization. The moment you see someone's true intentions, even if they don't confess, you know. Their silence speaks louder than their words ever could. And in that stillness, I understood something that would shape the rest of my life. The greatest threats do not come from outside the walls. They appear inside the circle you thought was safe. That was the moment the story truly began. The moment I realized how close I had come to losing everything. The moment I understood that survival sometimes depends on noticing the smallest whisper of danger. And that morning, I heard it. There is a strange quietness that settles over your life after you suspect someone close to you has crossed a line you never imagined anyone would cross. It isn't the dramatic kind of silence filled with shouting or confrontation. It's colder than that, heavier than that. A silence that wraps itself around your thoughts and forces you to look at every detail, every memory, every interaction with a new kind of scrutiny. I remember walking around my home that day, noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The arrangement of objects, the way the kitchen smelled, the subtle fingerprints on cupboards I hadn't opened, the faint scratches on a drawer that had no reason to be touched by anyone other than me. Everything suddenly felt unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel safe inside my own home. People assume that when you have wealth, influence, and resources, you live unbothered, untouched by the weight of ordinary fears. They imagine that money builds thick walls around you, walls no threat can penetrate. But the truth is far more unsettling. The more you have, the easier it is for danger to blend into your life unnoticed. Wealth attracts people, good ones, ambitious ones, loyal ones, but also the quiet opportunists, the jealous watchers, the ones who smile while calculating. When you invite people into your home, let them near your table, near your food, near your private life. You give them access to the very things that determine your survival. And sometimes, without realizing it, you hand that access to the wrong person. That day, even the sunlight that fell through the windows felt different, harsher, colder, as if the warmth had been drained from it. I walked slowly from room to room, not because I was afraid of someone hiding behind the door, but because I was suddenly aware that someone had already been hiding in plain sight for a very long time. Someone whose presence I never questioned. Someone who moved freely through rooms without raising suspicion. Someone who had blended so deeply into the rhythm of my life that I never once considered the possibility of malice. That was the part that bothered me the most. Not the attempt itself, but the ease with which it had been possible. When you are betrayed by an enemy, it hurts. But when you are betrayed by someone trusted, it shatters something fundamental inside you. It forces you to reevaluate every assumption about human nature, including your own. I found myself thinking back to casual conversations, harmless jokes, moments of shared laughter, gestures of kindness that now felt like rehearsed deceptions rather than genuine connection. And the worst part was knowing that during all those moments, intentions were shifting behind eyes I never thought to question. I sat down at my desk, the weight of the morning pressing on my shoulders, and I realized how fragile trust really is. A lifetime spent building intuition, studying people, creating systems, yet a single deceptive smile had slipped right through all of it. I felt a kind of exhaustion that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion that comes from realizing you've been playing the wrong game while believing you were in control. Wealth teaches you how to navigate markets, investments, innovation, but nothing prepares you for the sharpness of betrayal done quietly, methodically over time. Later, I remember looking at the glass still sitting on the table, the faint condensation slowly fading, the liquid untouched. It was such an ordinary thing, a simple glass, clear and harmless. Yet it represented the thin line between life continuing as usual and everything ending in a way that would have looked like a medical mystery rather than a crime. That glass was a symbol of how invisible danger can be, how close it can sit to you without announcing itself. And in that moment, I understood something I had ignored for years. Vulnerability does not care about wealth, status, or intelligence. It creeps in through familiarity, routine, and trust. I called for a private toxicology test later that day, not because I had proof, but because intuition refused to be ignored anymore. When you've lived long enough, you learn that instincts are not random. They are the mind's way of stitching together clues you didn't consciously register. The man on the other end of the call asked why I needed the test. I didn't give him a reason. I simply told him to come. There was no point in explaining something that sounded like paranoia without evidence. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, and waiting for more signs would only make me an easier target. For the next few days, I watched everything: the kitchen staff, the cleaning routines, the people moving around my house. I paid attention to details most people don't notice: hesitation in footsteps, the timing of routines, the way someone handled objects, the subtle tension when I entered a room unexpectedly. It's incredible how much you see when you look with suspicion for the first time. The world becomes sharper, clearer, almost painfully detailed. Every sound feels amplified. Every silence feels loaded. Meanwhile, the symptoms had already begun their silent spread. The fatigue that followed wasn't normal. It was the kind of exhaustion that seeped into my bones, making even simple tasks feel heavy. I would wake up after 8 hours of sleep feeling like I hadn't rested at all. At first, I blamed stress, long hours, or age. The explanations we all default to because they feel safer than confronting darker possibilities. But when the nausea began, subtle but persistent, I knew something was happening that had nothing to do with stress. There were moments where I stood in front of a mirror, trying to convince myself I was imagining it, that I was overthinking everything. But every day the symptoms grew more precise, more targeted, as if someone had crafted them deliberately. Food began to taste slightly off, not spoiled, not rotten, just wrong in a way I couldn't explain. My appetite disappeared. Headaches settled in quietly and refused to leave. I started losing weight without trying to. And through it all, the house remained calm, peaceful, ordinary, the perfect disguise for the unfolding threat. I visited doctors, of course. People assume that if you have access to the best medical care, you get answers quickly. But that's not how subtle poisoning works. It doesn't appear on standard tests. It hides behind normal blood work. It mimics common illnesses. Every doctor I saw told me the same thing: stress, exhaustion, overwork, age. I nodded politely, while knowing deep inside that they were wrong. They looked at charts, numbers, scans, everything that made sense scientifically. But none of them looked at me the way I looked at myself, someone whose instincts had never failed him before. The test results from the private toxicology lab didn't arrive for days, and those days felt like walking through a storm, without knowing where the lightning would strike. I kept the glass from that morning untouched on the far end of my desk, not as evidence, but as a reminder. A reminder that danger can appear in the smallest, most innocent forms. When the call finally came, the man on the phone hesitated before speaking, the sound of papers shifting quietly in the background. He confirmed what my intuition had been whispering: the presence of a metal that should never appear in anyone's body under normal circumstances. The tone of his voice changed as he continued, a mixture of confusion and concern. He asked where I could have been exposed, whether I had traveled, worked in industrial environments, handled chemicals. I answered no to every question, and with each answer, the silence on the other end became heavier. When I hung up, I felt an unexpected calmness settle over me. Not relief, not fear, just clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when a fog finally lifts after weeks of doubt. Everything suddenly made sense. The symptoms, the tension in the room, the hesitation I saw in someone's eyes that morning, the strange feeling in the air, the instinct telling me not to drink. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't imagination. Someone had tried to poison me, quietly, slowly, methodically. I didn't confront anyone. Confrontation is emotional, impulsive, messy. What I needed was precision, strategy, patience, the same qualities that had built my life, my success, my legacy. I knew that whoever had attempted this was watching me closely. They expected me to get weaker, sicker, more confused. They expected the symptoms to take over without resistance. They expected me to trust the wrong explanations. They expected me to dismiss my own instincts. They didn't expect me to notice. They didn't expect me to question. They didn't expect me to survive long enough to uncover the truth. That realization, it changed something in me. It awakened a version of myself I hadn't needed in years, the part that doesn't react, doesn't panic, doesn't crack under pressure. The part that watches silently and moves strategically. The part that has survived storms bigger than this one. the part that knows how to stay 3 steps ahead without letting the enemy know they've already lost. There comes a point in December when a person begins to look at their own reflection differently, not because the mirror has changed, but because something inside quietly shifts, as if the year itself has whispered a question that cannot be ignored. The cold air carries a strange honesty, and in that honesty, people begin to see who they have been, who they pretended to be, and who they secretly wanted to become. This month doesn't ask loudly. It simply stands at the edge of the year, waiting for you to acknowledge the truth you avoided in the warmer days. And in this moment of stillness, the mind drifts toward stories of those who rebuilt their lives from nothing. Names like Bill Gates, who once sat alone with nothing more than an idea, a dream, and an unshakable belief that things could be different if he dared to try. December has a way of making you revisit these examples, not to compare your journey, but to understand that every transformation begins in silence, in solitude, and in the willingness to take the first uncertain step. It is in these days, when nights stretch longer, that a person starts thinking about all the months that have passed, the ones they survived, the ones they wasted, and the ones that shaped them without mercy. And as the year prepares to end, December becomes a mirror of accountability. You are forced to confront the moments when you stayed silent instead of speaking, when you hesitated instead of acting, when you feared instead of trying. But strangely, this confrontation is gentle. December doesn't blame you. It invites you. It tells you that the year may be ending, but you are not. You still have time. You still have breath. You still have a chance to write the chapter you wished you had started earlier. And something about this month makes that possibility feel real, reachable, almost warm despite the cold around you. There is a unique kind of courage that only awakens when the world outside turns quiet. It's the courage that helps you release old versions of yourself, the version that settled, the one that doubted too much, the one that accepted less, the one that pretended to be satisfied while carrying storms inside. December teaches you that letting go is not failure. It is a beginning disguised as an ending. And as the last pages of the year slowly turn, you begin to understand that growth doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives softly, like snowfall, gentle, silent, yet completely transformative. Every snowflake changes the world a little, and every small decision you make now has the power to reshape the months ahead. In the quiet of this month, people finally hear their own hearts clearly. The distractions fade, the outside noise lowers, and what remains is a conversation you've avoided for too long. What do you truly want? Who do you truly want to become? What pain are you ready to stop carrying? December doesn't force you to answer immediately. It simply opens the door. And when you step through, even slightly, something inside you breathes for the first time in months. You begin to understand that the year was never meant to break you. It was meant to reveal you. Every disappointment carved strength you didn't know you had. Every delay taught patience. Every failure whispered, "Try again differently." And every night you fought through became proof that you were meant to reach something greater than the life you almost settled for. And so, as December unfolds slowly like a final chapter written in cold air and soft light, you start to sense a quiet fire building inside you. It is not loud or dramatic. It is steady. It is real. It is the part of you that refuses to enter the next year as the same person. This part of you wants to rise, to build, to grow, not for applause, not for validation, but simply because you know you were meant for more. This is the month where dreams stop being fantasies and start becoming decisions. This is the month where you rediscover your strength. This is the month where you finally understand that the ending of the year is actually the beginning of you. There is something almost mystical about the way December rearranges a person's priorities. The same things that felt overwhelming months ago now look small, manageable, almost simple. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because you became stronger without even noticing. Hard days build quiet resilience, and December is when that resilience finally becomes visible. You begin to see that everything you thought would break you has actually shaped you into someone capable of handling far more than you ever expected. You realize that the pain, the confusion, the setbacks, they were not signs that you were losing. They were signs that you were changing. And change is rarely comfortable, especially the kind that forces you to grow beyond your old limits. As the cold settles in, so does clarity. December has a way of wiping the fog off your inner lens, allowing you to see your patterns with honesty. You start to understand why you stayed stuck, why you kept returning to the same versions of yourself, why you reached for comfort instead of growth, why you settled for less than what you silently prayed for. And in this understanding, a new sense of responsibility awakens. Not heavy, not punishing, but freeing. You finally see that you were never weak. You were simply protecting a heart that hadn't healed yet. And December gently tells you, it's time now. It's time to grow beyond this. In these final weeks of the year, you also begin to understand the power of small decisions. The world often celebrates big success stories like Bill Gates building an empire from a single spark of an idea, but what people forget is that those stories began with quiet, private choices. Choices made when no one was watching. Choices made in seasons that looked ordinary from the outside but were transformational on the inside. December teaches you to value those hidden decisions, the moments where you choose discipline over comfort, healing over avoidance, effort over excuses, hope over fear. These are the decisions that shape a destiny, the ones that quietly change the direction of an entire life. And as you reflect on the year, something else rises within you, a soft forgiveness, not for others, but for yourself. You begin to let go of the judgment you carried, the guilt of wasted time, the shame of wrong choices, the regret of chances you didn't take. December whispers that you cannot enter a new year while still punishing yourself for old mistakes. You have learned. You have grown. You have earned the right to begin again without dragging the weight of yesterday behind you. And this self-forgiveness becomes the first gift you give yourself this month. A gift more powerful than anything wrapped in ribbons or boxes. December also brings a kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace born from understanding your own journey. You look back at all the storms you walked through, all the nights you stayed awake, all the moments when you felt like giving up. And you finally acknowledge your own strength. Not the kind of strength that shouts, but the kind that endures. The strength that wakes up each morning even when the heart is tired. The strength that tries again despite the fear of failure. The strength that continues to hope even when nothing seems certain. This strength becomes your quiet companion in December, reminding you that you are capable of carrying both your wounds and your dreams at the same time. And in this calm, reflective space, something extraordinary happens. You begin to imagine your future differently, not as a distant dream, not as something happening to someone else, but as something you can create, shape, build with your own hands. You begin to see the next year not as a continuation of your past, but as a canvas waiting for new colors, new chapters, new versions of you. December tells you that endings are illusions. Every ending is a beginning in disguise, and the person you are becoming is more powerful, more focused, and more capable than the person you've been. But December doesn't stop there. Once it opens the door to clarity, it begins to challenge you in gentle, almost unnoticeable ways. It asks you what you truly value, not what you pretend to value. It makes you question the habits you cling to, the comfort zones you hide in, the fears that silently guide your decisions. This month becomes a quiet teacher, showing you that the life you want isn't built on extraordinary moments. It's built on consistent courage. The courage to show up when motivation fades. The courage to heal when it hurts. The courage to let go when holding on is destroying you. And above everything, the courage to believe that you deserve more than what you've accepted so far. There's a strange magic in realizing that you've outgrown certain patterns, certain places, certain versions of yourself. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you are finally listening to the voice you silenced for too long, the voice that knew your worth long before you did. December brings that voice back. It reminds you that you were created for more than repeated cycles, more than surviving on empty hope, more than hiding your brilliance just to keep the peace around you. This month tells you to stop shrinking, stop apologizing, stop dimming, to take up the space you were always meant to take. And yet December is soft. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand transformation overnight. Instead, it creates an atmosphere, a quiet, cold, thoughtful atmosphere that lets you breathe for the first time in months. You begin to feel a calm resolve settling in your bones, a quiet assurance that you can rebuild what was broken, that you can rewrite the parts of your life that no longer reflect who you've become. This isn't the loud confidence that shouts. It's the calm confidence that simply knows. There comes a moment, every December, when you sit with yourself and realize that the year wasn't a waste after all. Even the hardest parts had meaning. Even the confusing chapters served a purpose. Even the days when you felt lost were leading you somewhere. You begin to see that nothing was random. Every delay redirected you. Every setback strengthened you. Every disappointment refined your vision. And every unanswered prayer protected you from something you couldn't see yet. As you continue to reflect, you start recognizing the difference between what you wanted and what you actually needed. Sometimes life didn't give you what you asked for because it was preparing you for something better. Sometimes closed doors weren't punishments, they were safeguards. And December is the month where all those hidden reasons begin to make sense. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to give you peace. And in that peace, a new hunger awakens. A hunger for growth, a hunger for progress, a hunger for a life that aligns with the deepest parts of you. You stop being afraid of starting over because you now understand that starting over doesn't mean you lost. It means you learned. You stop fearing time because you know that growth doesn't follow the world's calendar. It follows your courage. You stop envying others because you finally realize you are on your own timeline, your own path, your own unfolding. December becomes the moment when the future stops looking blurry and starts looking possible. The dreams you once hid behind fear now look reachable. The changes you postponed suddenly feel urgent. And the life you imagined begins to whisper back to you softly, "Let's begin." And as December settles further into your days, you begin to understand something you never truly paid attention to before. Growth is not loud, it's not dramatic, and it never arrives wrapped in clear instructions. It shows up quietly, through the way you no longer react to old triggers, through the way you stop chasing things that once consumed your heart, through the way you finally start choosing peace over chaos. These small changes, almost invisible at the surface, are the real signs of transformation. They show you that you're not the person you were at the beginning of the year. You've shed layers, outgrown seasons, and learned lessons that time itself carved into you. December teaches you that healing is not a single event, but a slow, gentle unfolding. You don't wake up one morning completely healed. You wake up one morning simply unbothered by what once destroyed you. And this realization hits differently in this month, because December carries a silence that makes you listen, really listen, to the quiet strength you've built. The strength that made you survive disappointments. The strength that made you carry burdens alone. The strength that made you keep going even when you had every reason to stop. This strength becomes clearer now, as if the year is holding a mirror up to you and saying, "Look at who you've become." There is also a certain honesty that December forces on you. You can't lie to yourself the way you did in the earlier months. You can't pretend the things that hurt you didn't hurt. You can't deny the dreams you kept buried. You can't ignore the people you need to let go of, or the boundaries you need to build, or the life you secretly want. This month strips away the noise, the excuses, the distractions, leaving you face to face with the truth you've been avoiding. But there is beauty in this truth, because with honesty comes direction. With direction comes clarity. And with clarity comes the courage to finally choose what aligns with your soul. Some nights in December feel heavier than others, not because something is wrong, but because your heart is sorting through the weight it has carried all year. Memories rise, regrets whisper, old dreams revisit you. It's natural. This is the month of reflection. But in these heavy nights, something else happens too, a kind of renewal. You begin to understand which thoughts deserve to stay and which ones were never yours to carry. You learn to separate temporary feelings from permanent truths. You learn to give yourself the grace you always offered to everyone else. December also brings a reminder that time is not your enemy. People fear the end of the year as if it's a countdown to failure, but December is not here to measure your worth. It is here to remind you of your resilience. You made it through days that felt impossible. You walked through chapters that tested your spirit. You endured the things you once thought would break you. And yet, here you are, breathing, standing, continuing. December honors that. It doesn't judge how fast you moved or how many goals you checked off. It only acknowledges that you kept going, and sometimes that is enough. And perhaps the most powerful thing December gives you is perspective. Suddenly, the things that once overwhelmed you don't feel as sharp. The fears that controlled you don't feel as real. The losses that hurt you don't feel as defining. You start to see that life isn't only made of the moments that break you, it's equally made of the moments that rebuild you. The small acts of kindness you received, the nights you comforted yourself, the days you rediscovered hope in the smallest ways. These moments mattered too, quietly stitching your spirit back together. As the year edges closer to its end, December becomes the soft bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. You realize you don't have to have everything figured out. You don't need perfect plans or flawless direction. You only need willingness, willingness to grow, willingness to let go, willingness to start again, willingness to believe that your story is still unfolding in ways you cannot yet see. And in this willingness, something begins, something subtle but powerful. A new beginning disguised as a quiet thought. A new strength disguised as a calm feeling. A new chapter disguised as a gentle whisper telling you, "You're ready now." There comes a moment at the end of every year when the world seems to slow just enough for you to finally hear the sound of your own heartbeat. December carries a silence unlike any other month. A silence that feels heavy, reflective, honest. A silence that does not judge you, yet forces you to confront every version of yourself you tried to outrun. It's the month where endings and beginnings sit side by side, breathing the same cold air, watching you closely as you try to figure out who you truly want to be. In this silence, a strange clarity rises inside you, one that you may have brushed aside during the rush of the year. It arrives slowly, like a soft winter wind, touching the corners of your thoughts, rearranging them without asking for permission. You begin to see your journey differently. You begin to understand that the battles you fought weren't meant to break you. They were meant to show you the parts of yourself you had forgotten, the strength you didn't know you had, the courage you didn't believe you owned, the resilience you didn't realize you carried in your bones. December becomes a mirror, one that doesn't reflect your face, but reflects your growth. And when you stand before that mirror, you notice things you overlooked for months. You notice the way your spirit survived storms that were supposed to drown you. You notice the way your heart continued beating even when it was bruised. You notice the way your soul kept moving forward even when it felt like giving up. This realization doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, softly, calmly. But it changes everything, because suddenly you begin to see yourself not as someone who struggled, but as someone who endured. The cold air feels different when this understanding settles inside you. It no longer feels harsh. It feels cleansing. The long nights no longer feel empty. They feel reflective. The slowing pace of the world no longer feels heavy. It feels necessary. December isn't just the last month of the year. It's the pause between chapters, the breath between battles, the doorway between who you were and who you are about to become. There is a reason people light candles in December. The world darkens earlier, the nights stretch longer, and the cold wraps around everything it touches. But inside homes, inside hearts, small lights begin to glow. Not because darkness has won, but because people refuse to let it. Human beings have always been this way. finding light in dark seasons, finding hope in quiet moments, and in this month, you too begin to search for your own light. Not in others, not in achievements, not in validation, but within yourself. You realize that somewhere between the chaos and the calm, you grew. You grew in ways no one saw. You changed in ways you didn't announce. You healed in ways you didn't broadcast. And December is the first time you finally allow yourself to acknowledge that you deserve credit for surviving a year that demanded so much from you. There is a softness in this realization, a warmth, a kind of inner embrace that whispers, "You made it." December holds many lessons, but perhaps the most powerful one is this. You are further than you think. You are stronger than you feel. You are becoming someone your past self would be proud of. And as this truth settles deeper, you begin revisiting moments from the year, moments you thought were failures but were actually lessons, moments you thought were endings but were actually beginnings, moments you thought were punishments but were actually protection. You begin to see the wisdom in what life took away and the meaning in what life gave back. It becomes clear that nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the delays, not the disappointments, not the lonely nights, not the uncertain days. Everything shaped you, everything carved you, everything guided you. December whispers something most people don't hear. Life isn't counting your mistakes. It's counting your attempts to rise. And rise you did, even when you fell, even when you doubted, even when you feared, even when you wanted to walk away from everything. You rose, not perfectly, not instantly, but you rose. And that is enough. As the days of December pass, a new kind of strength begins to build inside you, not the loud, fiery strength that comes from anger or adrenaline, but a quiet, steady strength born from acceptance. Acceptance of what happened, acceptance of what didn't, acceptance of what was lost, acceptance of what remains. This acceptance is not surrender, it is liberation. You stop expecting the past to fix itself. You stop waiting for people to understand what they never cared to. You stop holding on to expectations that exhausted your spirit. You stop demanding closure from chapters that have already ended. You begin to realize that peace doesn't come from control. Peace comes from letting life unfold in its own time. And December becomes the season where you finally let go. Not because you are tired, but because you are ready. Ready to grow. Ready to rebuild. Ready to dream again. Ready to walk into the unknown with a heart that finally trusts itself. People often talk about new beginnings in January, but the truth is, beginnings happen in December. Beginnings happen in silence, in reflection, in healing, in rediscovery, in the quiet courage to decide that you want more for yourself. This month teaches you to listen, to the world, to life, to your own heart. And if you listen closely, you begin to hear something beautiful rising inside you. A voice you silenced because you thought it was unrealistic. A dream you buried because you thought it was too late. A hope you ignored because you thought it was too fragile. But December brings them all back, softly, gently, patiently. Because this month knows that the year cannot end until you remember who you truly are. When you sit with yourself long enough, something incredible happens. You begin to hear the parts of you that have been quiet all year. Dreams that stayed patient. Emotions you tucked away because life demanded more from you than you were ready to give. Memories that resurfaced not to hurt you, but to remind you of who you used to be before the world asked you to become stronger. December is the only month that allows these quiet truths to rise without overwhelming you. It gives you space to breathe, to pause, to reorganize your life without rushing. And in that slow reconstruction, you start to understand that everything you experienced this year, every loss, every win, every silence, every storm, was shaping you into a version that could handle the future you are now walking toward. It's strange but comforting to realize that life was preparing you even when you thought you were breaking. You look around at your life in this final stretch of the year, and for the first time, you don't feel like you're racing against time. Instead, you feel aligned with it. You feel as though every step you took, even the hesitant ones, were guiding you exactly where you needed to be. The world outside may be getting colder, but something inside you is warming, gently, steadily, undeniably. And as this story comes to an end, I want you to remember something simple, something quiet, but something true. Life will take you through places that break you, and it will also take you through places that rebuild you. Sometimes the smallest town, the quietest moment, or the gentlest conversation becomes the turning point you never saw coming. If this journey made you feel something, peace, reflection, or even a small spark of hope, then let it stay with you. Let it remind you that you deserve people who see you, places that ground you, and moments that bring you back to yourself. If this story touched your heart even a little, make sure you like the video, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story like this. Your support helps us reach more people who need a moment of calm in a loud world. Take care of yourself. And remember, sometimes home isn't a place you find, sometimes it's a place that finds you.